September 20th, 1942 dawned clear over Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego, California. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders felt sweat forming on his palms despite the cool Pacific breeze. The morning air carried salt spray and aviation fuel fumes. His hands gripped a control stick that belonged to America's enemy. Japanese characters stared back at him from every instrument. The control layout felt alien under his fingertips. Strange smells filled the cockpit. Oil mixed with unfamiliar materials. Leather treated with foreign chemicals. Metal that had been forged in enemy factories. Armed sentries surrounded the hangar like statues. Their rifles gleamed in the morning sun. Orders had been crystal clear since this precious cargo arrived 3 weeks ago. No one approached without authorization. No photographs. No unauthorized personnel within 50 yards. Sanders sat inside the most valuable aircraft on Earth. His heart hammered against his ribs. The Mitsubishi A6M2 Model 210 fighter represented years of enemy engineering. Every rivet held secrets. Every wire carried intelligence worth more than gold. He released the brakes with trembling fingers. The captured fighter rolled forward on unfamiliar wheels. Its engine purred with surprising smoothness. The sound was different from American power plants. Higher pitched, more refined, almost musical in its precision. Minutes from now, this single test flight would shatter myths. Japanese aerial supremacy would begin its death spiral. Hidden weaknesses would emerge that would save thousands of American lives. The captured machine would birth a weapon system destined to destroy over 5,000 enemy aircraft. This transformation started not today, but 5 months earlier. Rain soaked an Aleutian island where a young Japanese pilot made his final landing. Weather that day was typical for the region. Fog rolled in thick banks. Visibility dropped to mere yards. The ground stayed perpetually damp. June 4th, 1942, brought chaos to the Pacific. 300 miles eastward, American dive bombers were destroying 4 Japanese aircraft carriers at Midway. The entire course of the Pacific War shifted in those morning hours. Admirals watched their strategies crumble. Pilots died in flaming aircraft. The ocean swallowed ships and dreams together. But in Alaska's remote Aleutian chain, a smaller drama unfolded. This event would prove equally transformative. The morning air was crisp with Arctic cold. Waves crashed against rocky shores. Seabirds wheeled overhead crying harsh warnings. Flight Petty Officer First Class Tadayoshi Koga was 19 years old. His face still held boyish features beneath his leather-flying helmet. He climbed into his Zero fighter aboard the carrier Ryujo. The deck crew moved with practiced efficiency. Fuel lines disconnected. Chocks pulled away. Launch signals flashed. His mission was part of a diversionary strike against Dutch Harbor. American intelligence would focus on Alaska while the main fleet attacked Midway. Koga launched with his wingmen into gray morning skies. Chief Petty Officer Makoto Endo flew to his right. Petty Officer Suguo Shikata held the left position. The formation flew northeast toward the American base. Below them, the Aleutian waters churned dark and cold. Ice floes drifted like white puzzle pieces. The landscape looked hostile and unforgiving. This was a place where men died quickly if they went down. Dutch Harbor appeared through breaks in the clouds. American installations spread across the harbor. Fuel tanks, barracks, defensive positions, a perfect target for the morning's work. Koga rolled into his attack dive with practiced precision. The Zero performed exactly as designed. Faster than anything Americans could field. More maneuverable than physics should allow. The aircraft seemed to dance through the air. Controls responded to mere thoughts. The machine and pilot moved as one entity. They attacked with devastating efficiency. A PBY Catalina patrol bomber exploded under their guns. Survivors hit the water and scattered like startled fish. The Japanese pilots strafed them methodically. War showed no mercy to those who fell from the sky. Then, everything changed. A single bullet fired from below found its mark. Ground fire from Dutch Harbor reached upward like deadly fingers, probably a 50 caliber machine gun. The heavy round struck Koga's engine compartment with tremendous force. The bullet severed his oil return line with surgical precision. In an engine dependent on constant lubrication, this meant death. Oil began spraying from the damaged line in dark streams. The precious fluid painted his windscreen. The engine temperature gauge climbed steadily. Koga knew he had perhaps 15 minutes before complete engine seizure. The mathematics were simple and cruel. Oil pressure would drop. Metal would grind against metal. Heat would build beyond tolerance. The engine would lock solid, and his Zero would become a glider. He radioed his flight commander about the damage. His voice remained steady despite the circumstances. Training suppressed panic. He turned toward Akutan Island 25 miles east of Dutch Harbor. Japanese planners had designated it as an emergency landing site. A submarine waited offshore in predetermined coordinates. Rescue procedures were well rehearsed. Downed pilots knew their chances of survival if they could reach the water alive. The submarine crews were experienced and brave. They would risk enemy fire to save Japanese airmen. Akutan Island emerged from the mist like a dark whale. Rocky shores rose from churning waters. Interior valleys held patches of green vegetation. Koga spotted what appeared to be perfect emergency landing terrain. A long stretch of flat grassland stretched inland from a broad bay. His wingmen circled above, watching his approach. They could see oil streaming from his engine cowling. The Zero left a dark trail in the air like blood from a wounded animal. Time was running short. The engine was making new sounds, grinding noises that spoke of impending failure. Koga extended his landing gear for what should have been routine. Wheels down emergency landings were practiced constantly. Every pilot knew the procedures by heart. Approach speed, angle of descent, touchdown point selection. Everything had been drilled into muscle memory. Shikata, flying overhead, suddenly noticed something wrong. Water glistened between the grass stalks below. Sunlight reflected off hidden pools. What looked like solid ground was actually deceptive bog. The grass concealed knee-deep mud and standing water. He tried desperately to radio a warning. His voice crackled through the static, but Koga was already committed to his landing approach. The Zero descended steadily toward the deceptive field. Altitude decreased. Airspeed held steady. The approach looked textbook perfect. The fighter's wheels touched grass at approximately 80 miles per hour. For one brief moment, the landing seemed successful. The aircraft rolled forward on what felt like solid ground. Then physics asserted its authority with brutal finality. The main gear sank deep into soft mud beneath the vegetation. The wheels caught with tremendous force. Forward momentum continued while the landing gear stopped dead. The lightweight fighter became a lever with the bog as fulcrum. The Zero's tail section continued traveling at landing speed. The nose pitched down violently into the marsh. The entire aircraft flipped completely over in a savage cartwheel. Metal screamed against earth. The fighter slammed upside down into the bog with bone-crushing impact. The tremendous force snapped Koga's neck instantly. Death came before he could draw another breath. His body remained suspended by seatbelts in the inverted cockpit. His service pistol stayed strapped to his waist. His samurai sword hung beside him. His flight suit remained pristine except for medical taping around his torso. Above the crash site, his wingmen faced an impossible decision. Standing orders required destruction of any disabled Zero. Enemy hands must never examine Japanese aircraft. Intelligence security demanded complete destruction. Machine guns were loaded and ready. They circled the wreckage multiple times. Their fingers rested on trigger buttons. The aircraft sat upside down like a turtle on its back. It appeared remarkably intact, despite the violent impact. Perhaps their comrade lived trapped inside, waiting for rescue. The wingmen could not bring themselves to fire. The chance that Koga survived paralyzed their trigger fingers. They could not murder their friend on mere possibility. Hope fought against orders. Human emotion overcame military necessity. After several more passes, their fuel ran dangerously low. The return flight to Ryujo was long over hostile waters. Reluctantly, they turned west and departed. Their friend's fate was beyond their control now. The fog swallowed them as they disappeared. The submarine assigned to rescue operations searched waters around Akutan for hours. Periscope sweeps found no survivors in the choppy seas. Eventually, the American destroyer USS Williamson arrived with depth charges ready. The submarine dove deep and escaped westward. Koga's body and his Zero remained alone in the Aleutian wilderness. 5,000 miles from Japan, they waited in silence. The aircraft held every secret of the Empire's most feared weapon. Those secrets would soon betray everything Japanese aviation believed sacred. For 5 weeks, the Zero sat undisturbed in the Akutan bog. The crash site lay hidden from standard shipping lanes. Aerial patrol routes missed the small valley completely. The location received perhaps 6 clear days per month through perpetual Aleutian fog. Aircraft carrier forces that might have searched had already retreated westward. The catastrophic defeat at Midway shattered Japanese naval aviation. Koga became another casualty statistic in a war turning against the Empire. His fate was forgotten amid larger disasters. July 10, 1942 brought American eyes to the hidden prize. Lieutenant William Thies flew a PBY Catalina patrol bomber through typical Aleutian weather. Navigation was treacherous near the Arctic Circle. Magnetic compasses spun wildly. Landmarks disappeared in perpetual mist. Dead reckoning had led Thies off course. When he spotted the Shumagan Islands through cloud breaks, he recognized his error. Dutch Harbor lay northwest. He chose to fly directly over Akutan Island rather than around it. Time and fuel were precious commodities. Machinist mate Albert Knack served as plane captain that day. His eyes swept the landscape below, watching for enemy activity. Through a temporary gap in fog, he spotted something unusual in the marsh, an artificial shape that did not belong in the wilderness. Bright red circles on wings were unmistakable. The Japanese rising sun insignia stood out against dark vegetation. Knack called out his discovery with excitement. Thies banked the lumbering patrol bomber into a tight circle for better observation. The Zero appeared remarkably intact from above. Battle damage was minimal. The aircraft sat inverted, but otherwise whole. This was a prize beyond imagination. Intelligence officers had dreamed of capturing an intact Zero for examination. Thies noted the position carefully on his navigation charts. Coordinates were marked and double-checked. Radio calls went out immediately to Dutch Harbor. Recovery operations would begin within hours. Every minute counted before weather closed in again. The recovery party landed near the crash site in rough seas. Boats fought through surf to reach the rocky shore. What they discovered exceeded their wildest expectations. The Zero had crashed in perhaps the only spot on Akutan where survival was possible. The bog was soft enough to cushion the violent impact. Yet it remained firm enough to prevent the aircraft from sinking completely. The marsh acted like a giant shock absorber. Forces that would have shattered the airframe on solid ground were dissipated harmlessly. Damage was surprisingly limited. The windscreen was crushed beyond repair. Propeller tips were bent and twisted. Landing gear was completely destroyed. Wingtips showed impact damage, but the fundamental airframe remained structurally intact. The recovery team carefully removed Koga's body from the cockpit. They noted the extensive medical taping around his torso, previous injuries or precautionary measures against high acceleration forces. His personal effects were collected as intelligence materials. Military honors marked his burial on a hillside overlooking the crash site. Enemy or not, he had died serving his country with courage. American servicemen understood such sacrifice. A simple grave marker noted his passing in this remote place. Extracting a fighter aircraft from an Aleutian bog presented enormous challenges. The recovery operation consumed nearly 3 weeks of backbreaking labor. Conditions were among the most inhospitable on Earth. Weather changed hourly. Equipment froze overnight, then rusted in the damp. Workers constructed a makeshift road using logs and planking. The captured fighter was slowly winched across half a mile of treacherous ground. Every foot required tremendous effort. Cables broke, winches jammed. Progress measured in yards per day. The prize justified any hardship. By late July, the Zero sat on a barge at Broad Bay. Loading required careful calculation of weight and balance. The aircraft would travel thousands of miles by sea. Salt spray and storms threatened additional damage. The vessel carrying history's most important captured aircraft departed Alaska in early August. It sailed south through waters recently contested by Japanese and American fleets. Submarine warfare made every mile dangerous. Armed escorts provided protection against enemy attack. Seattle received the precious cargo on August 11, 1942. Immediate transfer to another barge continued the journey south. Naval Air Station North Island near San Diego was the final destination. The captured Zero reached San Diego in mid-August under heavy military guard. 24-hour protection surrounded the secure hangar. Military police ensured no souvenir hunters could damage the invaluable prize. Word spread through Navy aviation circles with electric excitement. Finally, American engineers would examine the legendary fighter in detail. Navy Captain William Leonard called it a treasure that unlocked secrets at a time of desperate need. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Walsh stated that knowledge gained from the captured aircraft saved his life multiple times. The race began to restore the Zero to flying condition immediately. Every day the aircraft remained grounded meant more American pilots faced an enemy they could not understand. The restoration team worked around the clock. They documented every detail of construction while repairing crash damage. Urgency drove them beyond normal limits. Speed was astonishing given the complexity. Recognition that this single aircraft might hold keys to winning the air war motivated superhuman effort. The restoration revealed immediate insights into Japanese design philosophy that stunned American engineers. The Zero was built like a precision watch. Flush rivets covered the entire airframe. Guns mounted flush with wing surfaces minimized drag. Every component was designed for minimum weight and maximum efficiency. Nothing was wasted. Everything served a purpose. The instrument panel displayed remarkable simplicity. No superfluous gauges distracted the pilot. Essential readings were arranged for instant readability. The layout spoke of careful human factors engineering. Form followed function in every detail. Inspection panels opened by simply pushing marked spots with fingers. Internal latches released automatically. The entire aircraft could be disassembled and reassembled using minimal tools. This was crucial for field maintenance on primitive island bases, far from industrial support. Weight analysis shocked American designers. The Zero weighed between 5,300 and 6,165 pounds fully loaded. Configuration variables included ammunition fuel load and optional equipment. This was roughly 2,000 pounds lighter than the American F4F Wildcat. The weight savings came from revolutionary design choices. The Zero lacked armor protection for the pilot completely. Superior maneuverability was expected to avoid being hit. Fuel tanks were not self-sealing. Weight and capacity took priority over safety. The airframe used minimum structural material, just enough strength for anticipated loads with no safety margin. This represented fundamentally different design philosophy than American fighters. Where American aircraft prioritized pilot protection and structural ruggedness, the Zero sacrificed protection for performance. It was designed to win through superior agility rather than absorbing punishment. The captured aircraft revealed additional secrets under detailed examination. The engine was a 14-cylinder Nakajima Sakai radial producing approximately 950 horsepower. It used a float-type carburetor that would prove significant in combat situations. Wings folded for carrier storage using simple manual mechanisms. No hydraulic systems were required. Control surfaces were fabric covered over metal frames to minimize weight. The construction was elegant in its simplicity. Most remarkably, the armament package was formidable for such a lightweight aircraft. Two 7.7mm machine guns fired through the propeller arc. Two 20mm cannons were mounted in the wings. Firepower exceeded many heavier American fighters. By September 20th, just 41 days after arriving in San Diego, the Zero was ready to fly. The restoration team had replaced the crushed windscreen. The vertical stabilizer and rudder were straightened. Wing tips and flaps were repaired completely. Landing gear was rebuilt from salvaged and fabricated parts. The original three-blade Sumitomo propeller was carefully dressed and rebalanced. The captured aircraft received new paint. Red Japanese Hinomaru roundels were covered with American blue circle and white star insignia. It looked like an American aircraft wearing Japanese clothes. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders was selected as chief test pilot for the project. He had spent the previous week studying every aspect of the Zero while mechanics completed restoration work. Hours in the cockpit familiarized him with Japanese instruments and control layout. Sanders was an experienced test pilot, but this flight was unlike any he had attempted. He was about to fly an enemy aircraft whose flight characteristics could only be guessed from intelligence reports and combat observations. Those reports might be wrong. The aircraft might have hidden damage. If anything went wrong, Sanders might not survive the first flight. The Zero's reputation for superior performance was based on combat reports from pilots fighting for their lives. Objective analysis was impossible under combat conditions. This flight would provide the first scientific data. On the morning of September 20th, 1942, Sanders climbed into the Zero's cockpit as pilot rather than student. Ground crew started the engine, which caught immediately. The restoration team's work was vindicated by smooth operation. He taxied to the runway, conscious that dozens watched. Engineers crowded the tower windows. Intelligence officers lined the flight line. Navy brass observed from official positions. Everyone understood the historical significance of this moment. The first American pilot was about to fly Japan's most secret weapon. Sanders advanced the throttle and the Zero accelerated eagerly down the runway. The lightweight fighter lifted off after a remarkably short ground roll. Rate of climb impressed even experienced observers. For the next hour, Sanders explored the aircraft's flight envelope carefully. He climbed to various altitudes, testing performance at each level. Stall characteristics were evaluated cautiously. Basic maneuvers were practiced methodically. The aircraft's handling qualities were felt out gradually. What he discovered would change everything American pilots thought they knew. Immediately apparent was a critical weakness above 200 knots. The ailerons became increasingly heavy and unresponsive at high speeds. Sanders wrote in his report that aileron control froze up, requiring tremendous force on the control stick. The Zero rolled left much easier than right. This high-speed aileron problem was dramatic and completely unexpected. At low speeds, the Zero's maneuverability exceeded every claim made by Japanese pilots. It could turn inside any American fighter with ease. But above 230 miles per hour, the advantages disappeared completely. Fabric-covered control surfaces ballooned with air pressure at high speeds. Enormous stick forces were required to overcome the resistance. American fighters with metal-covered control surfaces and hydraulic boost systems maintained full control authority at all speeds. Sanders discovered a second critical weakness during negative acceleration maneuvers. When he pushed the stick forward sharply, inducing negative gravitational forces, the Zero's engine coughed and died completely. The float-type carburetor could not maintain fuel flow during sustained negative acceleration. The engine would restart when positive acceleration resumed, but for several seconds the Zero became a powerless glider. This weakness had profound tactical implications that Sanders recognized immediately. American pilots finally had their answer for escaping pursuing Zeros. Go into a vertical power dive using negative acceleration if possible to open range while the Zero's engine was stopped. At about 200 knots, roll hard right before the Zero pilot could get his sights lined up. The heavy aileron forces would prevent the enemy from following. Sanders completed 24 test flights over the next 25 days. Each flight revealed additional details about capabilities and limitations. He tested the aircraft at various altitudes, power settings, and combat configurations. Mock dogfights were flown against American fighters. The accumulated data was extraordinary and completely objective. Maximum speed was slightly less than the F4F Wildcat, contrary to combat reports suggesting the Japanese fighter was faster. Sanders speculated reconstruction weight might account for the difference. However, the Zero's exceptional range over 1,900 statute miles far exceeded any American carrier fighter. The aircraft could remain airborne for over 6 hours. This enabled escort missions deep into enemy territory and patrol of vast ocean expanses. Rate of climb exceeded American fighters significantly. The Zero could reach 2,000 feet, while an F4F reached only 15,000 feet in the same time. In turning combat at low speeds, the Zero completed full circles, while American fighters managed only 3/4 of a turn. These performance characteristics explained early war combat results completely. At low speeds and in turning fights, the Zero was simply superior to anything America fielded in late 1941 and early 1942. Japanese pilots had used these advantages to devastating effect, but Sanders' tests revealed that advantages came with exploitable weaknesses. Light construction meant the Zero could not withstand battle damage. Hits that merely damaged American fighters often proved fatal to the unarmored Zero. Materials analysis of captured components revealed aluminum alloys of excellent quality used in thicknesses American designers considered inadequate. The Zero was built to minimum tolerances with no safety margins for combat damage. Weight savings came at the cost of survivability. Sanders' final reports synthesized all test data into actionable intelligence. American pilots should avoid slow-speed turning fights where Zero maneuverability dominated. Instead, they should use diving attacks utilizing superior high-speed characteristics of American fighters. When pursued by Zeros, American pilots should enter steep dives, preferably with negative acceleration to kill the enemy engine. Then execute hard right rolls at high speed, where Zeros could not follow due to frozen ailerons. American fighters should use superior armor and firepower to absorb hits while delivering devastating bursts that would destroy the fragile Zero. Team tactics should replace individual dogfighting with wingmen covering each other using coordinated attacks. These recommendations were compiled and distributed throughout the fleet with unprecedented speed. The intelligence gained from one crashed Zero would transform American fighter tactics and help win the Pacific War. Combat pilots preparing for missions received comprehensive briefings about the Zero fighter's specific characteristics. Instructors explained exactly how to exploit every weakness discovered during testing. This crucial information became standard curriculum in training programs across the Pacific Theater. Every new aviator learned the high-speed diving technique combined with the hard right roll maneuver. These tactics would save countless American lives. Combat veterans who had survived early encounters with Japanese fighters suddenly possessed the knowledge they desperately needed. For months they had faced an enemy aircraft that seemed impossible to defeat. Now they understood what they had been fighting against. More importantly, they knew how to win. The psychological impact on American naval aviators was extraordinary. 8 long months had passed with pilots facing an aircraft that appeared invincible in combat. The Zero could outturn any American fighter with ease. It climbed faster than seemed physically possible. It could outmaneuver anything the Americans flew into battle. American pilots had developed deep respect for the Zero fighter. This respect bordered dangerously close to genuine fear. The official tactical doctrine when encountering Zero fighters had become simply running away. This represented a humiliating admission of American aerial inferiority in the Pacific theater. Everything changed with the captured aircraft's revelations. American pilots possessed concrete knowledge for the first time. They knew precisely how to engage Zero fighters and emerge victorious. The mystique surrounding the Japanese fighter began crumbling immediately. Combat reports started reflecting this new confidence. The Zero remained a formidable opponent in skilled hands. But it was no longer the invincible aircraft that had dominated Pacific skies for 8 months. It possessed clear weaknesses that could be exploited systematically. American pilots now knew exactly what those weaknesses were. They understood precisely how to turn those weaknesses into victory. The greatest contribution from the Aleutian Islands discovery extended far beyond tactical doctrine development. Aircraft design would benefit enormously from the intelligence gathered. One fighter already under development would incorporate these lessons most effectively. The Grumman F6F Hellcat was destined to transform American tactical knowledge into devastating combat results. The story behind the Hellcat's development reveals how captured intelligence influenced American aircraft design. This influence occurred even as the new fighter was entering its critical development phase. The connection between the captured Zero and the Hellcat has sparked historical debate among aviation experts. Some historians claim the Hellcat design was based entirely on studying the captured Japanese aircraft. Others point to development timelines that make direct influence impossible. The actual truth falls somewhere between these extreme positions. It represents parallel development processes combined with timely intelligence gathering. Grumman's engineering team possessed remarkable ability to incorporate lessons learned during active production phases. January 1942 arrived with significant challenges facing American aircraft manufacturers. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation occupied facilities at Bethpage on Long Island in New York. Company founder Leroy Grumman sat reviewing preliminary designs for what would eventually become the legendary F6F Hellcat. The performance numbers spread across his desk troubled him deeply. The United States Navy desperately needed a replacement fighter for the aging F4F Wildcat design. Something dramatically faster and more powerful was required. Reports arriving from Pacific combat zones described alarming Japanese air superiority. American pilots were being consistently outfought by enemy aircraft in every engagement. Grumman's design team worked under Chief Engineers Jake Swerble and Bill Schwendler. They had created what essentially amounted to a larger and more powerful version of the existing Wildcat fighter. The preliminary design looked promising on paper. However, Grumman worried it might prove insufficient against reported Japanese capabilities. Early 1942 brought increasingly disturbing reports from Pacific combat zones. American pilots faced overwhelming Japanese air superiority in every encounter. The F4F Wildcat served as Grumman's current frontline fighter for the Navy. Despite being solidly built and reliable, the Wildcat was proving inadequate against enemy aircraft. Combat reports indicated the Zero fighter exceeded Wildcat performance in nearly every measurable category. It could outclimb American fighters with ease. It could outturn them in any aerial engagement. It possessed superior range, allowing longer patrol times and pursuit capabilities. Something dramatically superior was needed urgently for American naval aviation. Grumman's initial F6F design carried the designation XF6F1 during development phases. The planned power plant was the Wright R2600 Cyclone engine, producing 1,700 horsepower. This represented significant improvement over the Wildcat's 1,200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R1830 engine. Grumman questioned whether this power increase provided sufficient performance improvement. The company had been developing the XF6F1 design since mid-1941. The formal development contract was signed on June 30, 1941. This occurred nearly 1 full year before the fateful crash in the Aleutian Islands. Design work proceeded rapidly through early 1942, driven by urgent Navy requirements. Grumman recognized that the Pacific War would ultimately be won or lost through air superiority. The Bureau of Aeronautics worked in close cooperation with Grumman's engineering teams. They incorporated feedback from combat pilots returning from Pacific operations. April 22, 1942, marked a significant milestone in Hellcat development. This occurred 6 weeks before the Battle of Midway. It happened 7 weeks before the crash that would provide crucial intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare visited Grumman's Bethpage facility on this date. O'Hare arrived fresh from combat operations where he had single-handedly defended the carrier Lexington against Japanese bomber attacks. His heroic actions earned him the Medal of Honor. He met with Grumman engineers to discuss F4F Wildcat performance against Zero fighters in actual combat conditions. His insights proved sobering for the engineering team. The Zero fighter was faster than American intelligence estimates had indicated. It climbed better than seemed physically possible, given its engine power ratings. It could turn inside the Wildcat with remarkable ease during aerial combat. O'Hare emphasized that American fighters needed significantly more engine power. Better climb rate performance was absolutely essential for combat survival. Improved pilot visibility would be crucial for engaging enemy aircraft effectively. These recommendations would shape future design decisions. The day before meeting with Grumman engineers, O'Hare had attended a ceremony at the White House. President Franklin Roosevelt presented him with the Medal of Honor during this visit. The president asked directly what was needed in a new naval fighter design. O'Hare's response was characteristically direct and memorable. He told the president they needed a plane that will go upstairs faster. This simple phrase captured the essence of what American naval aviation required for Pacific combat. Bureau of Aeronautics Lieutenant Commander A.M. Jackson worked closely with Grumman throughout the design process. He directed specific design changes based on accumulating combat experience from Pacific operations. Jackson emphasized the importance of mounting the pilot's cockpit higher in the aircraft fuselage. He specified that the forward fuselage should slope down slightly toward the engine cowling. This configuration would provide the pilot with excellent visibility over the aircraft's nose. Jackson stressed repeatedly to Grumman engineers that pilots cannot hit targets they cannot see clearly. These critical design changes were incorporated into the F6F development before the Aleutian discovery occurred. April 26, 1942, represented another crucial decision point in Hellcat development. This occurred 5 weeks before the crash that would provide invaluable intelligence about enemy aircraft capabilities. The Bureau of Aeronautics made a critical decision that would define the F6F's ultimate character. Based on combat accounts flowing back from Pacific operations and O'Hare's specific recommendations, the Bureau directed Grumman to install a more powerful engine in the second F6F prototype. The Wright R2600 engine was abandoned in favor of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp. This 18-cylinder radial engine produced 2,000 horsepower. It was the same power plant being used in the Vought F4U Corsair and Republic P-47 Thunderbolt fighters. The engine change represented a 50% increase in available power over the original F6F-1 design specifications. Grumman complied by completely redesigning and strengthening the F6F airframe to handle the more powerful engine installation. The change required extensive modifications to the engine mount systems. Cooling system components needed complete redesign. Structural components throughout the aircraft required strengthening to handle increased loads and stresses. The engine change meant significant delays in the development schedule. However, the performance gains would justify the additional development time. Grumman estimated the new power plant would increase overall performance by 25% over the original design specifications. The engine change decision resulted from multiple factors converging simultaneously during this critical period. The R-2800 engine had proven reliable during extensive testing phases. It was entering full production for other aircraft programs without significant delays. Pratt & Whitney could provide engines without the delays plaguing Wright R-2600 development programs. Most importantly, combat reports indicated that incremental improvements would prove insufficient against enemy aircraft. American fighters needed a quantum leap in performance capabilities to match or exceed Zero fighter capabilities in actual combat conditions. The first F6F prototype retained the Wright R-2600 Cyclone engine during initial testing phases. It made its maiden flight on June 26, 1942, with Chief Test Pilot Bob Hall at the controls. This flight occurred 8 days before the fateful crash in the Aleutian Islands. It happened 6 weeks before the aircraft would be discovered by American forces. The prototype performed well during initial test flights. It demonstrated good handling characteristics without any serious flight control problems. However, its performance with the 1,700 horsepower Cyclone engine confirmed Grumman's earlier concerns. Significantly more power would be needed for combat effectiveness against enemy aircraft. The second prototype carried the designation XF6F3 and was fitted with the 2,000 horsepower R-2800 double wasp engine. It first flew on July 30, 1942. This flight occurred 20 days after the discovery in the Aleutians. However, it took place 2 months before the captured aircraft would be restored to flying condition for testing purposes. The XF6F3's performance exceeded all expectations during initial test flights. The additional engine power completely transformed the basic design characteristics. It provided the climb rate and speed performance needed to compete with enemy fighters on equal terms in combat situations. Hellcat development continued throughout the summer of 1942. Grumman engineers refined the design based on ongoing combat reports and intelligence flowing back from Pacific operations. When the captured aircraft arrived in San Diego during mid-August, detailed technical data began reaching the Bureau of Aeronautics and Grumman within days of its arrival. The captured aircraft had not yet been restored to flying condition. However, physical examination revealed crucial information about its construction methods. Weight distribution became clearly understood. Armament systems were thoroughly documented. Design philosophy differences between American and Japanese approaches became apparent. This intelligence arrived at the most critical moment in F6F development phases. The basic airframe design was established. The engine selection had been finalized. The first prototype was actively flying test missions. However, production had not yet begun, meaning significant changes could still be incorporated relatively easily into the design. Grumman engineers studied the technical data with intense interest and focus. They looked for ways to ensure their fighter could not just match, but decisively exceed the enemy aircraft's capabilities in all performance categories that mattered for combat effectiveness. The captured aircraft weighed between 5,300 and 6,100 pounds when fully loaded for combat missions. The F6F would weigh over 12,000 pounds in similar configuration. This represented an enormous weight penalty, more than double the enemy aircraft's weight. This disadvantage had to be compensated through additional engine power and intelligent design solutions. Grumman's design philosophy differed fundamentally from the Japanese approach to fighter design. Where the enemy aircraft sacrificed protection for raw performance, the F6F would provide both protection and performance capabilities. Company founder Roy Grumman made a key decision after studying all available technical data. He determined that Grumman could match or surpass enemy aircraft performance in most critical respects. This could be accomplished without sacrificing pilot armor protection. Self-sealing fuel tanks would be retained. Robust fuselage structure would not be compromised for weight savings. The F6F would compensate for additional structural weight through raw engine power from the R-2800 power plant. This fundamental decision shaped everything that followed in the development process. the F6F would be built tough enough to absorb battle damage that would destroy lighter enemy aircraft. It would protect its pilot with armor plate positioned behind the seat. Bulletproof windscreen would shield the pilot from frontal attacks. Self-sealing fuel tanks could absorb hits without catastrophic fires that plagued enemy aircraft. Redundant systems and robust structure would withstand hard carrier landings and significant combat damage. The weight penalty would be overcome through raw power combined with intelligent design that maximized available performance from the airframe. Technical data combined with test flight results during September and October influenced specific design decisions as the F6F moved toward full production. The F6F's wing design emphasized high-speed performance characteristics. It used different airfoil sections and control surface designs compared to the earlier Wildcat fighter. The ailerons received hydraulic boost systems and metal covering. This ensured full control authority would be maintained at all flight speeds. This design directly addressed the high-speed aileron control problems discovered during testing of the captured aircraft. The F6F would maintain effective roll control at speeds where enemy fighter controls became completely ineffective during high-speed flight regimes. The F6F's fuel system used pressure carburetor technology rather than the float-type system used in enemy aircraft. This ensured the engine would continue running smoothly under negative acceleration conditions. This eliminated the critical weakness that could be exploited during diving attacks. F6F pilots could dive away from pursuing enemy fighters without experiencing engine failure at crucial moments. Enemy pilots attempting to follow would experience engine cutting out during negative acceleration phases of pursuit. The F6F's structural design could handle 9G positive acceleration and 6G negative acceleration loads. This far exceeded enemy aircraft structural limitations under similar conditions. F6F pilots could use aggressive maneuvering without fear of structural failure. Enemy aircraft attempting to follow identical maneuvers risked catastrophic structural failure and breakup. The armament package was increased to 6 50-caliber machine guns compared to the Wildcat's 4 guns. Later production versions would offer options for 2 20mm cannons combined with 4 50-caliber guns. The concentrated firepower could destroy lightly built enemy aircraft with short, accurate bursts. Meanwhile, the F6F's armored structure could absorb return fire that would prove fatal to enemy pilots. Visibility from the cockpit was exceptional, thanks to the raised pilot position, providing clear views in all directions around the aircraft. This addressed Jackson's repeated emphasis that pilots could not effectively engage targets they could not see clearly. The design incorporated lessons learned from defensive tactics, recognizing that visibility was crucial for mutual support between wingmen during combat. October 3, 1942 marked the first flight of the initial production F6F-3 aircraft. This occurred just 2 weeks after completion of initial test flights in the captured enemy aircraft. The timing was not purely coincidental. Production had been deliberately delayed until engineers could incorporate the latest intelligence gathered from studying enemy aircraft systems. The myth that the F6F was designed entirely based on captured enemy aircraft is demonstrably false. The basic design predated the discovery by many months. However, the intelligence gathered did influence final production specifications and tactical employment doctrine. The first production F6F-3 aircraft began reaching fleet squadrons during early 1943. Fighting Squadron 9 received the first operational Hellcats in February 1943. They embarked on the carrier Essex for intensive training and workup operations. Pilot reaction to the new fighter was overwhelmingly enthusiastic. After months of flying F4F Wildcats and struggling against superior enemy aircraft, the F6F represented a quantum leap in combat capability. It was dramatically faster than previous fighters. It climbed significantly better under all conditions. It carried more concentrated firepower. Visibility was superior in all directions. It felt solid and substantial in ways the Wildcat never had. Pilots quickly discovered the F6F was remarkably easy to fly safely. Grumman had designed it specifically for operation by relatively inexperienced pilots fresh from training programs. The company recognized that wartime expansion would flood fleet squadrons with newly trained aviators lacking extensive flight experience. The F6F possessed no dangerous flight characteristics or tricky handling quirks that could kill unwary pilots. It remained stable and predictable under all normal flight conditions. It was forgiving of pilot errors that would prove fatal in less stable aircraft designs. Carrier landing operations represented the most challenging aspect of naval aviation for any pilot. The Hellcat made these operations straightforward, even for relatively inexperienced aviators. The robust landing gear system absorbed hard impacts that would collapse lesser aircraft designs. The exceptional visibility allowed pilots to judge their approach angles precisely. The controls remained fully responsive at the low speeds required for safe carrier approaches. Production ramped up with astonishing speed that impressed industrial observers. Grumman constructed a completely new factory at Bethpage specifically for F6F production operations. The first aircraft rolled off production lines before the factory buildings were even completed. Workers assembled aircraft in the open air while construction continued around them. At peak production during 1944, Grumman produced 644 complete aircraft in a single month. This represented one finished Hellcat rolling off the production line every hour around the clock. It was an aircraft production record that was never equaled during the war by any manufacturer. The production scale was absolutely staggering by any measure. Each individual F6F required approximately 2,000 separate parts sourced from hundreds of different subcontractors across the country. Pratt & Whitney engines were manufactured in 3 separate factory facilities and shipped to Bethpage for installation. Grumman coordinated this massive industrial symphony with precision that amazed government observers. Much of the credit belonged to Jake Swerble, who served as Grumman's production genius throughout the war. He organized workflow patterns and supply chain logistics with unprecedented efficiency for aircraft manufacturing. Many Grumman workers had never built aircraft before joining the company. Yet they produced what became the most successful carrier fighter design of the entire war. Between the first production flight in October 1942 and war's end in November 1945, approximately 37 months passed. During this period, Grumman produced 275 F6F Hellcat fighters from their single factory complex. No other aircraft manufacturing program achieved comparable production numbers from a single facility. The F6F made its combat debut on August 31, 1943. This occurred 15 months after the Aleutian discovery and 11 months after initial test flights of captured enemy aircraft. Aircraft from fighting squadrons. 5 and 9 operated from carriers Yorktown and Independence. They attacked Marcus Island as part of a carrier raid designed to test the new fighter under combat conditions. The mission achieved overwhelming success that exceeded all expectations. No enemy fighters managed to get airborne to contest the attack. Several were destroyed on the ground before they could participate in combat. 2 Hellcats were lost to anti-aircraft fire from ground installations. However, in air-to-air combat situations, the F6F demonstrated immediate and decisive superiority over all enemy aircraft encountered. Over the following months, the F6F became the standard fighter embarked on American fleet carriers. It gradually replaced the F4F Wildcat on large fleet carriers, while Wildcats continued serving effectively on smaller escort carriers. By early 1944, the Hellcat equipped 15 carrier fighter squadrons and was rapidly becoming the dominant American naval fighter throughout the Pacific theater. Tactical lessons learned from studying captured enemy aircraft were incorporated into every aspect of F6F operational doctrine. Pilots received training to avoid slow-speed turning engagements unless they possessed significant altitude or numerical advantages. F6F doctrine emphasized high-speed slashing attack techniques instead. Pilots learned to dive from altitude to build maximum speed before engaging enemy fighters. They made single-firing passes with concentrated firepower, then zoomed back to altitude before more maneuverable enemy aircraft could respond effectively. This tactic exploited enemy aircraft weaknesses while maximizing F6F performance advantages. The Thatch-Weave defensive formation developed by Lieutenant Commander John Thatch became standard doctrine for all F6F squadrons. When attacked by enemy fighters, F6F pilots flew in mutually supporting pairs. They wove back and forth, so any enemy aircraft pursuing one F6F immediately faced head-on fire from the wingman. This tactic neutralized enemy turning advantages by forcing enemy pilots to either break off their attacks or face head-on engagements. In head-on situations, the F6F's superior firepower and pilot protection dominated every encounter decisively. Pilots learned to use superior speed and engine power to dictate engagement terms completely. If tactical situations favored the F6F, they would engage aggressively. If conditions were unfavorable, they used superior speed to disengage rapidly. They could reposition an attack from advantageous positions that enemy aircraft could not counter. The F6F's exceptional climb rate allowed rapid altitude recovery after diving attacks. Its superior speed enabled escape from unfavorable tactical situations that would trap other fighter designs. Its extended endurance allowed longer patrol times and pursuit of fleeing enemies beyond enemy aircraft operational limits. November 23, 1943, brought the Gilbert Islands campaign and crucial combat testing. F6F Hellcats from carrier Essex engaged enemy Zero fighters over Tarawa in what became the first major test of the new fighter, against experienced enemy pilots flying their best aircraft. 30 enemy fighters rose to intercept the American strike force approaching the invasion beaches. The ensuing aerial battle raged across skies over the amphibious landing areas below. When combat ended, American pilots claimed 30 enemy fighters destroyed for the loss of a single F6F. The Battle of Tarawa demonstrated everything the F6F was designed to accomplish in Pacific combat. American pilots, many with relatively limited combat experience, had met veteran enemy aviators flying their most capable fighters. The Americans achieved overwhelming victory that crushed enemy resistance completely. The combination of superior aircraft performance with sound tactics based on captured aircraft intelligence had created an unbeatable formula. Intensive training programs had prepared American pilots to exploit every advantage their aircraft provided in combat situations. The battle's outcomes sent shockwaves through both American and enemy commands throughout the Pacific. For Americans, it validated the F6F's design philosophy and tactical doctrines developed from studying captured enemy aircraft. For the enemy, it revealed that American aircraft had caught up to and decisively surpassed their capabilities. The age of enemy air superiority was ending rapidly across the Pacific theater. However, Tarawa represented just the beginning of F6F dominance. The Hellcat would prove its superior capabilities in every major engagement across the Pacific for the next 20 months. It compiled the most dominant combat record achieved by any American fighter design during World War II. June 19, 1944, brought the Philippine Sea battle west of the Mariana Islands. F6F Hellcats from 15 American aircraft carriers prepared to face the largest enemy carrier aviation force assembled since the Battle of Midway 2 years earlier. 7 large fleet carriers and 8 light carriers of Task Force 58 launched their fighters. The enemy had assembled 9 aircraft carriers and launched wave after wave of aircraft to destroy the American invasion fleet attacking Saipan. What followed became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, representing the most one-sided aerial battle in naval aviation history. The first enemy strike, consisting of 69 aircraft, lost 42 planes before reaching the American fleet. The remaining 27 that penetrated to the carriers accomplished absolutely nothing while facing storms of anti-aircraft fire and swarming F6F fighters. The second wave, consisting of 177 enemy aircraft, lost 97 before they could even begin their attacks on American ships. Enemy carrier aviation was being systematically destroyed by superior American fighters and tactics. Throughout the day-long battle, enemy carriers launched 370 aircraft in multiple coordinated strikes against the American fleet. Only 130 returned to their carriers. F6F Hellcats flying combat air patrol over the American fleet and hunting enemy strike groups shot down the vast majority of enemy aircraft. American losses totaled between 23 and 30 aircraft, with many pilots successfully rescued from the ocean by destroyers and submarines. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot represented the complete vindication of American fighter design philosophy and tactical doctrine development based on studying captured enemy aircraft systems and capabilities. Japan faced complete strategic collapse. The carrier air groups had been rebuilt with painstaking care after Midway's devastating losses. Now they lay in ruins again. Every experienced pilot was dead. The veterans who had trained the current generation were gone forever. The aircraft stockpiled for the final decisive battle had vanished. Japanese naval aviation would never recover from this single day of destruction. The Battle of the Philippine Sea proved the F6F's deadly effectiveness beyond all doubt. The Hellcats' exceptional range allowed it to maintain continuous combat air patrols. Fighters circled endlessly above American fleets. The aircraft's impressive climb rate meant F6Fs could intercept enemy strikes at perfect altitude. They met incoming attacks exactly where they needed to be. The fighter's speed allowed relentless pursuit of fleeing Japanese aircraft. No escape was possible once the Hellcat gave chase. Its devastating firepower and robust protection meant overwhelming advantage in any direct engagement. Head-to-head combat became a death sentence for Japanese pilots. Most importantly, the F6F's forgiving flight characteristics meant even inexperienced American pilots could operate it effectively in combat. By mid-1944, America was producing aviators far faster than Japan could match. The Hellcat allowed these fresh pilots to enter combat with confidence they would survive and succeed. Japanese pilots faced increasingly abbreviated training as fuel shortages mounted. Instructor losses created a devastating spiral. By late 1944, Japanese aviators entered combat with perhaps one-third the flight hours their American counterparts received. The experience gap combined with F6F technical superiority created an unstoppable death spiral. Every engagement cost Japan irreplaceable veteran pilots. American losses were quickly replaced by training pipelines producing thousands of new aviators each year. The replacement rate was staggering. The Hellcats' contribution extended far beyond simple aerial combat. Engineers adapted the basic aircraft into specialized variants addressing specific tactical requirements. Each modification served a particular battlefield need. The F6F-3N and F6F-5N night fighter variants carried radar equipment in pods mounted on the starboard wing. This allowed interception of Japanese night bombing raids that had previously struck with impunity. The radar installation reduced top speed slightly. Night fighter pilots found this capability worth the performance trade-off. F6F night fighters achieved remarkable success against Japanese night raiders. They shot down bombers that had attacked freely under darkness cover. The psychological impact was enormous. No longer could Japanese bombers rely on night protection. The F6F-3P and F6F-5P photographic reconnaissance variants replaced guns with cameras. These aircraft conducted crucial intelligence missions over enemy territory. Their speed and range allowed deep penetration into Japanese-held areas. They photographed targets and escaped before interceptors could respond. Later, F6F5 variants were modified to carry 2,000-pound bombs on centerline racks. Rocket rails under the wings transformed the fighter into a devastating fighter-bomber. F6Fs armed with bombs and rockets provided crushing close air support for Marine and Army forces. They fought across Pacific Islands attacking Japanese bunkers with precision. Artillery positions were destroyed with surgical accuracy. Troop concentrations were devastated by attacks that artillery could never match. The versatility was unprecedented. By World War II's end, F6F Hellcats had compiled statistics that remain unmatched by any American fighter. The aircraft destroyed 5163 enemy aircraft in Pacific air-to-air combat by Navy and Marine Corps pilots. An additional 60 aircraft were destroyed in other theaters. The total reached 523 when including British Royal Navy Fleet air arm victories. Only 270 F6Fs were lost in air-to-air combat. This gave the aircraft an overall kill-to-loss ratio of 19-1. Against Japanese Zeros specifically, the ratio reached 13-1. These numbers reflected multiple converging factors. Superior aircraft performance played a crucial role. Sound tactical doctrine derived from studying the Akutan Zero provided the foundation. Increasingly skilled American pilots faced declining Japanese opposition as the war progressed. The F6F produced more fighter aces than any other Allied aircraft in World War II. Between 305 and 307 Navy Hellcat pilots achieved ace status with 5 or more victories. Slight variations in counts depend on how shared kills were attributed. The Navy's leading ace, Commander David McCampbell, scored all 34 victories flying F6Fs. His record stood as testament to both pilot skill and aircraft capability. The combination proved unstoppable in experienced hands. The Hellcats' combat record was so dominant that late-war Japanese pilots developed what American intelligence called zero fatigue. This was recognition that engaging F6Fs was likely to prove fatal. Japanese pilots increasingly avoided combat whenever possible. They dove away from approaching Hellcats. They fled into clouds rather than fight. They broke off engagements at the first opportunity. The psychological dominance was complete. This mental superiority proved as important as technical advantages. It allowed American carrier groups to operate with near impunity. Commanders knew Japanese air opposition would be minimal and ineffective. The fear factor had reversed completely. The contrast with early war combat was stark and dramatic. In 1942, American pilots fled from Zeros whenever escape was possible. The Japanese fighter's reputation created panic in American cockpits. By 1945, Japanese pilots were fleeing from Hellcats. The transformation was complete and irreversible. The Akutan Zero's role in this transformation cannot be precisely quantified. However, its importance remains undeniable throughout the historical record. The captured aircraft provided the first detailed intelligence on Zero capabilities and critical limitations. Sanders's test flights revealed specific weaknesses that could be exploited tactically. American pilots learned exactly how to fight the enemy fighter. The technical data influenced F6F design decisions at a crucial moment when changes could still be incorporated into production aircraft. Most importantly, the Akutan Zero destroyed myths surrounding the Japanese fighter. It proved the Zero was not an invincible supernatural weapon. Rather, it was an aircraft with specific strengths balanced by specific weaknesses. Knowledge replaced fear. The combination of F6F Hellcat performance and tactical knowledge gained from the Akutan Zero created powerful synergy. This synergy transformed American naval aviation completely. The F6F was not designed solely because of the Akutan Zero, but it was refined based on intelligence from the captured aircraft. American tactical doctrine was not created purely by studying captured Zeros, but tactics were validated and formalized by Sanders' test flights and subsequent technical analysis. The result was an integrated system combining aircraft, tactics, training, and industrial production that overwhelmed Japanese aviation. By war's end, Japan had produced approximately 2,500 Zeros. This was their primary fighter throughout the entire conflict. The United States produced 12,275 F6F Hellcats in just 37 months. Additionally, thousands of F4U Corsairs and other fighters rolled off American assembly lines. The production differential reflected America's massive industrial might. However, the combat differential reflected the F6F's technical superiority and the tactical doctrine that employed it so effectively. Numbers alone could not explain the kill ratios achieved. The Akutan Zero was destroyed in February 1945. Ironically, it died in a training accident rather than combat. While taxiing for takeoff at Naval Air Station North Island, an SB-2C Helldiver dive bomber lost control during ground operations. The dive bomber crashed directly into the parked Zero. Its spinning propeller sliced the Japanese fighter into twisted pieces. The aircraft that had survived an Aleutian crash landing was destroyed by friendly fire on an American airfield. William Leonard salvaged several gauges from the twisted wreckage. He donated these precious artifacts to the National Museum of the United States Navy. The Alaska Heritage Museum and Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum also preserved small fragments. The physical aircraft was gone forever, but its legacy lived on in every F6F that flew combat missions. It survived in every American pilot who knew the Zero's critical weaknesses. It continued in every tactical manual that incorporated lessons learned from Sanders' methodical test flights. Koga's body, initially buried on Akutan Island, was exhumed by American Graves Registration Service teams in 1947. His remains were reburied on Adak Island, further down the Aleutian chain. In 1953, the Adak Cemetery was excavated completely. 236 bodies, likely including Koga's remains, were returned to Japan for proper burial. The young pilot, who died at age 19, became an unwitting contributor to Japan's ultimate defeat. His perfectly preserved aircraft revealed secrets that would doom thousands of his countrymen. The historical debate about the Akutan Zero's importance continues among military historians. Some argue it was the single most important intelligence capture of the entire Pacific War. They claim it was more valuable than code-breaking or any other intelligence source. Others contend that American victory was inevitable, regardless of any single factor. They argue the Zero's capture merely accelerated trends already firmly underway. The industrial and numerical advantages would have proven decisive eventually. Japanese historian and Air Self-Defense Force Lieutenant General Masataka Okumiya, who flew as a staff officer in most major Pacific carrier battles, offered a different perspective. He stated that acquisition of the Akutan Zero was no less serious than the Japanese defeat at Midway. The Zero's secrets being revealed to American engineers and test pilots represented a catastrophic intelligence failure. Its consequences rippled throughout the remaining war years, affecting every subsequent aerial engagement. Fighter ace William Leonard called the captured Zero a treasure that unlocked so many secrets at a time when the need was desperately great. The timing could not have been more perfect for American forces. Marine ace Kenneth Walsh credited intelligence from Koga's Zero with saving his life several times. The tactical knowledge allowed him to survive early encounters that might otherwise have proven fatal. Personal testimonies reinforce the aircraft's strategic importance. The truth likely incorporates elements from all these different perspectives. The Akutan Zero was not solely responsible for American victory. That victory rested on industrial capacity, code breaking, submarine warfare, and numerous other critical factors. But the captured Zero was a crucial piece of the complex puzzle. It arrived at exactly the right moment to influence aircraft design decisions and tactical doctrine development. The timing was absolutely perfect. Without the Akutan Zero, the F6F would still have been an excellent fighter aircraft. American industry would still have overwhelmed Japan's limited production capacity. American victory would likely have been achieved through sheer numbers and resources. but the process might have taken significantly longer. It would have cost more American lives in prolonged fighting. It would have involved greater uncertainty about how to defeat the Zero's apparent capabilities. The captured aircraft shortened the learning curve dramatically. The 19-to-1 kill ratio represented multiple factors converging perfectly. Superior aircraft design prioritized both performance and pilot protection. Tactical doctrine derived from studying enemy capabilities and weaknesses provided the framework. Training programs prepared pilots for combat realities rather than peacetime theory. Industrial production ensured numerical superiority in every engagement. And crucially, detailed intelligence about the enemy's primary weapon came from a single nearly intact example captured by pure chance in the Aleutian wilderness. American servicemen who flew F6F Hellcats during the war gathered at various reunions over the decades following World War II. Many were former Hellcat pilots who had dominated Pacific skies. Now they shared memories and honored fallen comrades at these emotional gatherings. Speakers at these reunions repeatedly referenced the Akutan Zero and the priceless intelligence it had provided. They spoke of how knowing the Zero's weaknesses had given them confidence in combat situations. Fear had been replaced by knowledge and tactical awareness. They described using the high-speed dive and hard right roll techniques that Sanders had discovered during his test flights. These maneuvers became standard doctrine for engaging Zeros. They explained how F6F design incorporated lessons learned directly from the captured Japanese fighter. Veterans consistently emphasized a common theme that resonated through their testimonies. "We were told the Zero was invincible," one former fighter ace explained to reunion audiences. "We believed this completely because we had seen what it could do to our aircraft in early combat engagements. Then we learned its secrets from the captured plane recovered in Alaska. We discovered it could not roll effectively at high speeds. We learned its engine would quit under negative G acceleration forces. We learned it was fragile and would burn easily if hit properly. Suddenly it was no longer an invincible supernatural weapon. It was just another aircraft, one we could beat if we flew intelligently. The F6F gave us the technological tools we needed. The Akutan Zero gave us the tactical knowledge. Together, they gave us complete victory." The F6F Hellcat remained in frontline service through World War II's end. It was gradually supplemented by the F4U Corsair as that aircraft's carrier landing problems were finally resolved. After the war, Hellcats were quickly phased out of fleet service. Jets and more modern propeller fighters replaced them rapidly. Many went to reserve squadrons where they served into the early 1950s. Others were converted to target drones or simply scrapped as surplus. The last Navy Hellcat was retired in 1954, just 9 years after the war ended. The rapid obsolescence testified to how quickly aviation technology advanced during and immediately after World War II. An aircraft that represented state-of-the-art technology in 1943 was hopelessly outdated by 1954. It could not compete with jets that flew twice as fast and climbed 3 times as quickly. But the Hellcat's remarkable combat record ensured it would never be forgotten by aviation historians. Museum displays across the United States feature beautifully preserved F6Fs. Many have been restored to flying condition with painstaking care. Airshow crowds watch with genuine awe as vintage Hellcats perform aerobatic displays. The distinctive engine sound and unmistakable profile evoke an era when American naval aviation achieved complete dominance. This dominance came through engineering excellence combined with tactical brilliance. Approximately 70 F6F Hellcats survive in museums and private collections worldwide today. 7 remain airworthy, all based in the United States. They are regularly flown at airshows and commemorative events. Each flight serves as a powerful reminder of the 12,000 aircraft that rolled off Grumman's busy assembly lines. It honors the 34,000 pilots who flew them in combat missions. It commemorates the 5,000 enemy aircraft they destroyed. The Akutan Zero itself lives on only in small fragments scattered across museums. Thousands of pages of test reports and intelligence analyses remain archived in the National Archives, but its impact on the Pacific War far exceeded its modest physical presence. A single aircraft captured by pure chance was tested for just a few months. It was destroyed in an accidental collision, yet it contributed to American victory in ways that can never be precisely measured, but can never be legitimately dismissed. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, the test pilot who first flew the Akutan Zero, lived to see the F6F's complete combat success. He continued serving in various aviation test and evaluation roles throughout the war. He contributed to development programs for multiple aircraft types. After the war, Sanders retired from the Navy and worked in the aerospace industry. His expertise in aircraft testing proved valuable in the rapid technological advancement of the post-war era. He passed away in the 1970s, having witnessed naval aviation's complete transformation from propeller fighters to supersonic jets. Sanders rarely spoke publicly about his role in testing the Akutan Zero. He considered it simply one assignment among many in a career devoted to naval aviation excellence, but those who served with him recognized the crucial importance of his methodical work. His careful test flights, detailed written reports, and analytical insights contributed directly to American tactical doctrine. They influenced F6F design decisions indirectly but significantly. He was a quiet professional who performed his job superbly at a moment when it mattered most. The broader lesson from the Akutan Zero and F6F Hellcat story extends far beyond World War II's historical context. Modern military forces spend billions on intelligence gathering, technical analysis, and threat assessment. The Akutan Zero example proved how valuable detailed knowledge of enemy capabilities can prove. Every captured enemy aircraft represents potential intelligence gold. Every defector who brings technical information could be crucial. Every intelligence source that reveals enemy weaknesses might be another Akutan Zero. Each could be a key that unlocks tactical and technological advantages. Understanding your enemy's capabilities and critical limitations can mean the difference between victory and catastrophic defeat. A single piece of hardware, properly analyzed and effectively exploited, can influence weapon system design. It can guide tactical development and determine battle outcomes. The Akutan Zero arrived at precisely the moment when it could influence F6F development most significantly. Sanders's test flights revealed critical weaknesses exactly when pilots needed confidence to face the seemingly invincible Zero. The tactical lessons were distributed when training programs could incorporate them most effectively. A year earlier or later, the impact might have been minimal or irrelevant. The timing was absolutely perfect, and America exploited this opportunity fully and ruthlessly. The Zero in 1942 was arguably the world's best carrier fighter. It was superior in many respects to anything America could field at that time. But America's ability to produce thousands of F6Fs changed the equation completely. The capacity to train tens of thousands of pilots provided overwhelming numbers. The ability to sustain combat operations across an entire ocean gave strategic advantages the Zero's technical excellence could not overcome. Quality matters enormously, but quantity has a quality of its own. This is especially true when combined with tactical intelligence and sound operational doctrine. The F6F Hellcat and Akutan Zero represent two sides of this complex equation. The Hellcat was the product of American industrial might, engineering skill, and tactical intelligence synthesis. The Akutan Zero was fortune's unexpected gift to American intelligence operations. It was a stroke of incredible luck that revealed crucial information about enemy capabilities at exactly the right moment. Together, they created a combination that proved completely unstoppable. This combination transformed American naval aviation from defensive inferiority in early 1942 to overwhelming dominance by mid-1944. The change was dramatic, comprehensive, and irreversible. The young Japanese pilot who died in an Aleutian bog could not have known his perfectly preserved fighter would contribute to his nation's ultimate defeat. His wingmen, hoping he had survived the crash, could not have known that their mercy in not destroying his aircraft would doom thousands of their fellow pilots. The American salvage crews struggling in that remote Alaskan marsh could not have known they were recovering the key to air superiority across the entire Pacific theater. Eddie Sanders, taxiing that captured Zero for its first American test flight, could not have fully appreciated that his methodical flights would influence a fighter that would help win the war. But history is made by precisely such moments. Chance and preparation intersect at critical junctures. Fortune favors those ready to exploit unexpected opportunities. A single piece of intelligence arrives at exactly the right time to influence events far beyond its apparent significance. The Akutan Zero represented such a pivotal moment in military history. The F6F Hellcat became its lasting legacy. One captured aircraft, one skilled test pilot, one perfect moment in time when intelligence, design, and tactical doctrine converged. They created a weapon system that achieved an unprecedented 19-to-1 kill ratio. They swept Japanese aviation from Pacific skies completely and permanently. The transformation of American naval aviation from underdog status to dominant force happened through multiple factors converging perfectly. Industrial capacity provided the foundation. Engineering excellence created superior aircraft. Skilled pilots flew them effectively. Most crucially, intelligence provided the knowledge needed to exploit enemy weaknesses. The Akutan Zero revealed that the seemingly invincible Japanese fighter had exploitable vulnerabilities. The F6F Hellcat was designed and employed to exploit those weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. When American pilots took F6F Hellcats into combat, they carried more than superior technology. They carried superior knowledge gained through intelligence analysis. They knew the Zero's critical weaknesses because Eddie Sanders had discovered and documented them methodically. They knew exactly how to exploit those weaknesses because tactical doctrine had been completely rewritten based on Sanders's test flights and subsequent analysis. They knew they could win because the mystique of Japanese invincibility had been shattered by hard technical data from the captured aircraft. The 19-to-1 kill ratio was the inevitable result of this knowledge advantage. It stands as testament to what can be achieved when chance provides opportunity and skill transforms that opportunity into overwhelming tactical advantage. The story of how one test pilot and one captured Zero turned the F6F Hellcat into a 19-to-1 killing machine demonstrates that modern warfare is decided not just by courage and firepower, intelligence, adaptation, and the ability to learn from studying the enemy prove equally crucial. The F6F Hellcat and Akutan Zero together wrote a chapter in aviation history that continues to resonate 8 decades later. They provide enduring proof that sometimes the greatest victories come not through destruction, but through understanding enemy capabilities and exploiting weaknesses systematically.